Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Scott Barrett, fantasypoints.com. Today's live stream, which I think will also turn into a podcast, is about best ball. It's just we're gonna, break down what is best ball, how do you optimally play best ball. It's, in my opinion, the easiest fantasy format, the most addicting and the most fun fantasy format. And so today we got on the preeminent best ball expert. There is no one in this industry close. Uh, Really, the Matthew Berry of best ball is my close and personal friend, Mike Beers. In addition to just being a great guy, he's someone who has really helped me tremendous amount throughout my career. In addition to his friendship and mentorship, he's really been sort of like the silent co-creator and mastermind behind a lot of my favorite tools and articles. I've sent him articles to read and ask for advice. Expected fantasy points wouldn't have been able to come into existence without him sort of teaching me some useful Excel tricks. And this is Mike Beers. Mike, you wanna tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself, where you're at now, your humble roots. I believe you were in the investment industry, but hedge fund.
Yeah, my humble roots as a hedge fund analyst. Yeah, no, let's see. I was out of college. I was in finance for about 8 years, and then I left to stay home with my kids, who are now just about. I got twins who are about to turn 10, and the older one's about to turn 11. So I've been a dad for a while, and I first started writing for Rotoviz. Maybe I don't know, 5-6 years ago. 5 years ago probably, and they just, like, some charts I had put on Twitter caught the attention of Fantasy Douche, who was still active at the time and was running the site, and I got to write a few articles, which was really cool. And I did that for a little while, and then did a best ball series for Roto Grinders after that. And I was writing like 2 articles a week on best ball, doing the like value watch, which was like picking out players, but then also a series talking strategy. And I did that for a little over a year, and then decided to launch with Curtis Patrick, who had been running Dynasty Command Center. We launched Best Ball Command Center, which was like a concierge best ball advice kind of thing. I would give people advice on particular drafts, about picks, about roster construction. And then after that, I joined Curtis again at Rotoviz, and now I am the head of data and NFL data and analytics there. So building the tools, working on the tools. I brought all my best ball stuff over to Rotoviz, and but yeah, best ball has always been my focus. I've been a big fantasy player for 15, 20 years now. I don't know how old I am anymore, but 15 years probably. And but best ball, I really got into it because it wasn't super popular. Like, this is like 5 years ago, and there were just like some obvious questions that I had about the game when I was first getting into it. Like, okay, like I get how the scoring works, but like, how many players am I supposed to draft at each position? And there were a few articles out there that, people were answering that. They're saying, like, you should draft between 5 and 6 running backs. You should draft between 6 and 8 wide receivers. And then I had follow-up questions that nobody was answering. It's like, well, what if I take running backs, my first 2 picks? Then how many should I draft? And nobody was answering that question. And so I just decided, all right, I'm going to answer these questions myself because I want to win this game. And downloaded, whatever hundreds of thousands of picks I could get from, it was my fantasy league at the time. Now we're getting them from Fanball and from FFPC. And, I think the database that I'm working with now has something like, 8 million actual picks that people have made. And yeah, so I just love working with this data, and I've spent like way too much time thinking about it. I've written like weird algorithms to try to, solve best ball roster construction. And Yeah, I think I pretty much got it down at this point. The roster construction part. Unfortunately, a huge part of best ball is, actually being right about who the best players are going to be and seeing the future. And I'm not real great at that. I lean on the guys like you and like the writers at Rotoviz to try to pick the right players. But roster construction puts me in a position to win. Even if I'm not right a lot of the time, which is cool. I like it. So I've focused a lot on it over the past few years.
Yeah, well, I will say, you can just use our customized best ball rankings to, help you profit in drafts. That's a big edge, probably just as big as drafting the right positions, but that is so important, as well as, some other edges to you'll find, like potentially stacking, things we'll talk about later on. But yes, I mean, Rotoviz's tools designed by Beers are second to none. They're fantastic. They're phenomenal. Beers is really the best in the game at that, and his best ball tools on Rotoviz are certainly worth the cost of the subscription alone. Add to that, Sean Siegel on staff, Curtis Patrick, and yeah, I highly recommend a Rotoviz subscription. So I don't know where to go from here, Beersy.
We should probably talk about best ball.
Oh, that's a good idea. All right. You've convinced me. So the way I explain it to people, best ball is sort of like a mock draft where you can win money, where, there's no frustrating start sit decisions. There's no trades. There's no waiver wire. You don't have to set waiver claims. Like, I hate that. So it's the most low maintenance fantasy format imaginable, and it's just so easy to do. You could do slow drafts, so a draft that lasts 4 to 6, or you have 4 to 6 hours to make your pick. So you can take like a week. It's, again, very low maintenance, and it's super addicting. Like, I've drafted over 100 teams many years. I would probably go that route again this year. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's low maintenance until it isn't, right? And when you really get into it, like I have and like you have, these slow drafts, it's easy to make a pick, and then but you got 20 going at a time, and you're on the clock every couple of hours. But no, it's really great. I mean, the draft is the most fun part to me. I am the person who hates remembering on Tuesday night that I got to do waiver claims. And I think there are a lot of people like that, but like being able to do the draft, go after the players you want, and then build a portfolio. Like, that's a part of it that I really like, that, casual players might not get into, right? Because if you're not doing more than, 20 of these, you don't have to care about a portfolio. But I actually track, the exposures I have to players, sort of the average price I've paid for them over the course of 6-7 month off season. And there's a lot of like nuance and kind of stuff that's different about it than your typical redraft league, where, with weekly waivers and trades and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun, and there are a lot of ways to just get a leg up on your opponents, like, that are really easy to execute. Like, this roster construction stuff. Like, I put a lot of work into gathering all the data and whatever, but the conclusions that come out of it, the stuff you're supposed to do, it's just easy to do. And I love that. I mean, you go into a game with the lead, right? You just, if you just follow some simple rules.
Yeah, so I think that is a big part of it. And like I said, I think this is the most exploitable fantasy format. It is the easiest for one big reason. Your opponents aren't playing optimally. In fact, they're playing very suboptimally. You could look at like the best basketball player. I think you and I will both agree it's the famed pseudo-anonymous Aaron H. He's never posted a ROI below 50%. On the Ross Tucker podcast last week, I accidentally said win rate, and he emailed me. He was like, dude, 50% win rate? That's
that would be something.
My bad. That's 50% ROI was like the lowest he's had, and he's played since 2015 or well before that. And he drafts more teams than anyone. But if you just think about that, okay, you draft $110 teams, you spend $1,000, you make $500 in profit. minimum each year. Like that's awesome. Um, so we could talk about some of the things people are doing to draft suboptimally. One of which is, I guess, not using our rankings, so not drafting the right players. And we can talk about what I change in my rankings for best ball to make it distinct from start sit. But the key thing to optimize your drafts is drafting the right positions. And drafting the right positions in the right rounds. You had a great thread on why it's not as simple as looking at, okay, 3 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 8 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 2 defenses is the optimal strategy. It's a little more nuanced than that. You want to talk about that thread?
Yeah. So the idea is, there are these ranges that you want to be in, and they're fairly narrow. Like wide receivers, depending on the format, it's anywhere from 6 to like 9 or something like that. And running backs, it's going to be 5 or 6, except for some special cases. Like it's not that big of a range. It seems fairly simple. But it actually, the way you execute it varies pretty wildly and widely based on how your draft plays out. If you start your draft with 3 straight running backs, it turns out it's optimal not to draft another running back the entire rest of the draft, in a 20-round draft, which seems crazy to people. But people go into drafts and they'll draft 3 running backs, and then they'll draft another one in the 4th round, and then another one in the 6th round, because the idea that running backs are scarce, and they're not thinking about the fact that you only start 2 running backs, that wide receivers at the same ADP score more points, and you have to start at least 3 of them every week. And there are little things like that as your draft plays out, you have to keep track of, okay, how much have I invested in this position? And that tells you, okay, that is how I know that I'm supposed to be on the 6 end of the range as opposed to the 9 end of the range for this position. And it actually works out like pretty straightforward to follow. It's an idea of balance, sort of quality versus quantity, right? Like if you load up on a position early in the draft, you don't need as many of those players at that position. And if you don't, like vice versa, you need more of them. Like you could not draft wide receivers for a while, that's fine. But then you want 9 of them instead of 7 of them. And it's fairly easy to execute. But, for a while, nobody was really thinking about it that way. It was just, okay, like, my roster construction is going to be 3 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 7 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 3 defense, whatever. And that roster construction, while like on average, it might've been the best at the time, is completely backwards if you start your draft in a particular way. Like it's just wrong. It will put you in a losing position. So, what I'm doing is just compounding these little edges, through roster construction to put myself in a better position to win, so that if I am good at picking players, I'm definitely going to win. And if I'm not very good at picking players, then I could still win. And, little things like, if you take a tight end early, like if you've got Travis Kelce in like a best ball 10s format, you're taking 2 tight ends, like end of story. If you take a 3rd tight end, then you're behind. And if you only take 2, then you're ahead. And casual players who haven't watched these podcasts, read your articles, read Sean Siegel's articles, don't realize that, and you're ahead of them from the jump. And there are a lot of things like that. It's just paying attention to how your draft is playing out. Like I don't do the same thing in every draft. Far from it. I have 0 RB teams. I created a 3 running back start strategy and wrote like 2,000 words in an article about it. And on a site that loves to do 0 RB, that's all about 0 RB. And the point was, it's like sometimes it's right to do this, and if you start that way, you just execute the rest of your draft in a different way than you normally would, and you've got that balance, and you've got a good team, a great team, if you just pay attention to how you're building your roster. So It's just compounding little edges, right? So like I have this tool on Rotoviz. It's called the Roster Construction Explorer, and you can look at, okay, what is the win rate over the past 5 years for teams with 2 tight ends versus 3 tight ends, and you see the difference is like 0.5%. And someone might go to that tool and see that and just think, like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm not going to bother with this 0.5% win rate difference. Like if I just picked Lamar Jackson last year, I had a 15% edge on my opponents. Who cares about roster construction? But what I'm doing is I'm looking at that 0.5% and I'm saying, okay, well, what if I got my tight end in the first round or second round? Okay, now 2 tight ends versus 3 tight ends. Now that percentage difference grows to, maybe a whole percent or a 1.5%. And so I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going with 2 tight ends. And then I'm looking at, okay, given that I got this tight end and I got a running back in, the other of the first 2 rounds, how many running backs am I supposed to get? And it turns out like I've got another percent and a half that I can gain by being at the right amount there. And then I look at, okay, now that I've got a tight end in the first round and a running back in the second round, like what is the best thing to do at wide receiver? And, then I'm gaining another 2% there. And, well, as the draft unfolds and I'm making the right decisions, sort of optimizing these 1-2% edges, I built up like an 8%, like doubled my chance of winning just based on roster construction, over my opponents. Like that's insane. I'm twice as likely to win as the next guy just by the order in which I picked my positions, just by paying attention to that, like regardless of the players that I picked, right? So the thing that people miss, I think, with roster construction is it looks like tiny little like differences. People are like, well, it's, it doesn't matter. I'm going to pick the right players and this stuff is just going to wash out. But if you are smart about it every step of the way, like you can double your chance of winning just by following sound roster construction, which, in a format where particularly, and, a lot of these are very top heavy, like your chances of coming, first place pays, 90% of the money or whatever. Doubling your chance of getting first place is something that nobody should ignore.
Right. Like you said, it's basically, or you told me another time, it's basically like, starting a beer pong game with your opponent already down 3 cups, or a basketball game ahead 15 points, and, by doing nothing, basically, just like, it's not hard to do, just knowing the right positions. I also like another thing you once told me where it's not so much, knowing the right one strategy. It's just having like 20 different strategies in your tool belt. And then, okay, you draft this guy, you draft that guy. By the 5th round, there's only 5 different strategies you can go, and you know which ones work. And it depends on who's available at the time to make those picks. Like the best ball players I know, you don't really think about roster construction until, round 5 or whatever, outside of a few small details. But let's talk about some of the different positions and how they're valued differently in best ball. Again, this is going to be dependent on where you're drafting, like FFPC Superflex versus a 3-man underdog, the DraftKings Best Ball Championship, where you're playing against a million other people. But we'll stick mostly with Fanball Classic just because we have a partnership with them, and we also have the largest and most robust sample size with them. We have like 30,000 drafts since 2015, something like that. But yeah, so let's start it off looking at the quarterback position. And immediately to me, or your numbers, or the tool you have suggested that quarterback is far more valuable in best ball leagues. You need to draft them earlier than you would in a start sit league. I have some theories on why that is, but why don't you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, it would be helpful, I think, if we like put my screen up and I can show you on one of the tools that we've got some of the stuff on quarterbacks. So I'm going to pull up this is the Best Ball Win Rate Explorer. So let's see here. Okay, so hopefully you are seeing on the screen the win rate explorer. All right, great. So this tab in particular, this is a positional heat map, and this is looking at here. I'll put on every year. So we got 6 years of fan ball drafts, and I've already got some things plugged in here. I was looking at running backs earlier. I'm going to switch it to quarterback. And what this does is it looks at, okay, where are the best places to draft quarterbacks in a fan ball league, right? And when you, as it loads, when you think about redraft, I mean, it's very popular to wait a very long time for quarterback. I mean, late round quarterback has become a pretty well accepted strategy across the fantasy industry, but that's different in best ball. And as you alluded to, and one of the big things driving that is the fact that everyone is drafting 2 to 3 quarterbacks, like in a fan ball or best ball 10s league. And that means, if you want to wait till the 15th round to pick a quarterback, they're all going to be gone. Your QB1 is going to be by ADP or by order drafted is going to be like the QB 28. And you're not going to win that way. You can't go to the waiver wire and stream quarterbacks. You have to get in a little earlier. At the same time, you can't take your quarterback right at the beginning. So what this table is showing on the screen is over the past 6 seasons. At the top, this is your baseline, like basically by draft order, what are the win rates for every team? So, having the 2nd pick or the 4th pick over this period has been really, really good. And picking at the end of the draft has been not so good. But what this table is showing is, okay, where are the best spots to pick a quarterback? It's comparing what are the win rates for teams who pick their quarterbacks in these ranges versus all other teams. And if you're taking a quarterback super early, you're losing. You're behind. It's not a good idea. And I pound the table every year. Everyone tells me, Lamar Jackson is like getting a QB1 and an RB1 together. No, don't draft him. Don't spend your 2nd round, 3rd round pick on Lamar Jackson. I don't care if he is that good. It's not going to work. You can build a better roster by waiting and getting multiple quarterbacks who are 80% as good. And that it just shows up really clearly on this table. Anyone who's picking quarterbacks in the 1st through 4th round basically is behind. And then you would think if you were just thinking about regular redraft leagues that, toward the end of the draft would be a really good spot to get quarterbacks, waiting on quarterback, the sort of streaming idea. But what ends up happening in best ball is because you have to have 2 to 3 quarterbacks, like I said, they're all gone by the time we're down here in the 14th round. So you really need to start picking them a lot sooner. And there's really this sweet spot between sort of the 7th and 11th round, where you should really be getting your quarterbacks, solidifying that position, and then returning to the other positions, not having to worry about quarterback anymore. And this shows up. You can also look at, okay, when should I get my first quarterback, right? We look at just QB1. And again, you would think it would be much later just thinking about regular redraft, but it's actually, this 7 to 11 range, you better have a quarterback by the 11th round or you're behind. So it's different from a regular redraft league. And that's just thinking about the format. If we switch this to Superflex, like, looking at FFPC leagues or something, all of this would be moved up a few rounds. You need to have your quarterback sooner. But the idea that you could just wait forever, like you could in your, 12-team redraft league with weekly waivers, just doesn't exist here. So it's definitely, it's a different animal for sure. This other tool is the roster construction explorer I talked about earlier. And if we look at just quarterback win rates over time, having 2 or 3. 2 is slightly better over the past 4 years. Has put you way ahead of anything outside of that range. If you're only going with 1 quarterback, you're losing. Like, just don't, that's ridiculous. Don't do that. If you're going with 4, you're probably also losing because you're wasting a pick on a quarterback that you don't need. But you can do things like look at, okay, does this change if I get my first quarterback before the 8th round? And it does a little bit. So, I use this tool a lot throughout my drafts to look at, okay, I've done X, Y, Z. How does that change the optimal roster construction? And I think it would be a good thing to do. We can hop off of my screen now, but we are currently in we're in a mock draft, right? A mock MFL 10. And if we look at the roster construction and some of the players, or some of the teams, like some of them are going to look way behind. Let's see here. I'm trying to pull.
All right, so let me chime in. Yeah. So I think a big reason why quarterbacks are more valuable in best ball, late round QB, king in, start, sit, but in best ball, one reason is without the waiver wire, the ability to make ad drops, you can't stream the position. Like Sean Corner last year and the year before that streamed his way to QB6 and QB levels of production with only quarterbacks who are owned in less than 50% of leagues. And there's less scarcity. So in a typical 12-man start-sit league, you'll only ever see like 14 to 16 quarterbacks drafted or rostered at any given time. But in a best ball 10, you're going to see 24 quarterbacks, more than that, 30 quarterbacks drafted. And then like of those 30 quarterbacks, how many can you realistically say or with any confidence are going to be starting in week one? And then of those who might have a risk of getting benched with like a rookie breathing down their neck. So yeah, you can't wait too long at the position. You don't want to be the first or second person to draft a quarterback, but really diminishing returns. Tight ends, sort of the same thing for both reasons. No streaming. You can't pick up a Justin Herbert or Darren Waller off of waivers. The well runs dry really fast. Quarterback, also the ADP hasn't been great. It hasn't really correlated to fantasy points as well as the other big 3 positions. Anything you want to add there before we move on to look at running back?
No, I mean, I think the 2 things to remember, really the one thing to remember is just get your quarterbacks in that sort of sweet spot between the 7th to 11th round in a 20-round draft. You don't want to be the first person to take a quarterback, and you don't want to be the last person, generally speaking. And if you got 2 of the top 5 guys, you just stop. You don't need a third one. Like that's that idea of balance, right? If you're investing a lot in a couple of quarterbacks, it's because you think they're going to be good. Don't plan for them to fail by taking a third quarterback. And that's something that I think everybody should keep in mind as they're drafting.
All right. Well, moving on to the running back position. So a big thing is, you guys know me for start-sit leagues. I'm bell cow or bust. I, firmly an advocate of that. I don't draft. I never do 0 RB. I don't think it's an optimal strategy in start-sit. I think it's fairly suboptimal. But in best ball, I think you massively have to devalue the running back position. I think 0 RB becomes a far more viable strategy. I think you need to bump wide receivers up a tremendous amount. You need to bump running backs down. And I think a good example of this is we can look at Aaron Jones, Nyheim Hines, and JD McKissick. So like Aaron Jones is an easy, must start every week RB1. And then Hines and McKissick were super frustrating to own week to week. You can never really predict their good games. Hines, for instance, In his 5 least started games this year in start sit, he averaged 16.4 fantasy points per game, which was more than double all of his other games. So like you just never got him right. And when you started him, he killed you. And I mean, Jones just like outscored these guys by a tremendous amount. Jones ranked 4th in fantasy points per game. Both running backs ranked 25th and 26th. But in best ball, where you just take the higher score of each player each week, they outproduced Jones. So not even counting in, the flex, so weeks they both went off. So you really can get away with more of a quantity over quality approach. Predictability doesn't matter. Weekly upside is far more valuable. And yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Though I think you need to be careful saying that like zero RB is sort of like optimal for best ball, because it's really going to depend on where you're playing.
More viable. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. But, in a format where you're starting 3 wide receivers and you can flex a 4th one, and you only start 2 running backs, definitely is going to devalue the running back position. But in another format where, say, you have 2 flex and only start 2 wide receivers, like FFPC, it gets really dicey trying to go 0 RB in that kind of format. But your point is 100% true about not just the running back position, but all positions, that you can piece together really strong scores at different positions, from apparently weaker players in a regular redraft league, if they're more volatile and unpredictable. So you can wait on running back and just get more of them if you got guys who you think are going to have those big weeks at unpredictable times. You can also do that wide receiver. You can take, if you can get multiple bell cow running backs in the first couple of rounds and then just take 9 wide receivers the rest of your draft, that's fine too. What you don't want to do is get those bell cows and then continue taking running backs. You don't want to start out with 3 straight wide receivers and then keep drafting wide receivers the rest of the way and not put anything into running back, not put anything into tight end or quarterback. But yeah, I think running back is really interesting, because you see every year there's 1 or 2 running backs, like from the first and second round, that just have massive win rates. And that makes people think, okay, you got to get that bell cow running back in the first round. Like, you got to do it. But the reason that, McCaffrey 2 years ago, Kamara last year, like, these guys have such high win rates is that the other running backs in the first 2 rounds were all shit, like they got injured, or they didn't produce, or Devontae Adams scored 100 more points than them, or Travis Kelce scored 150 more points than them. Like, there's like 1 or 2 running backs who were amazing out of the 12 that everyone assumed would be amazing. So I prefer to, just recognize that I've got that 1 or 2 in 12 chance at the running back, whereas wide receivers tend to be a little more predictable. If a guy's in the top 5, he's got a pretty damn good chance of finishing in the top 5. I mean, there are busts every year. Michael Thomas killed me personally this year. But it's certainly it's actually a higher floor strategy, running back, 0 RB in best ball than running back heavy, which I think is counterintuitive to a lot of people. So for that reason.
Yeah. So looking at your numbers, well, first of all, I mean, I do think the optimal approach, mostly optimal approach, or, in a vacuum, is modified RB, or we'll get to later, high end tight end, or some combination of both. But basically, if you don't know, modified 0 RB is you draft a running back in round 1, and then you just wait a really long time. So your point on, McCaffrey being 1 in 12 odds, I do think you're being a little harsh on, some of the high end producers, but like realistically, that's where leagues are won. especially in start sit, but even in best ball where it's like, okay, you had Alvin Kamara last year, Derrick Henry, uh, Aaron Jones went a big way. And, 80 maybe wasn't a great year. And the year before that wasn't great. Saquon got hurt. McCaffrey got hurt. But more or less, where are you going to find the highest end producers? It's going to be round one, and it's going to be a running back. The Uber backs, like the Christian McCaffreys, the Saquon Barkleys of the world, those are the highest producers, the highest scorers. They have the highest ceilings. They have the highest floors, and they offer the most relative value within their position or amongst their in position peers. And so, I mean, that you could pull up the numbers. I do think, modified zero RB is going to produce the best win rate of, within a sample, or do you disagree with that?
No, I think it has. I think that's been the ideal for several years. I think it took a big hit in 2020 though, with McCaffrey and Barkley both. I mean, Barkley had like a 2% win rate. Zeke had a 2% win rate. Those are bad numbers. I mean, if you had those guys, you weren't winning. So it was a rough year for the strategy, but generally speaking, it's the right way to go. I mean, people who drafted Kamara and then just left running back alone for 5-6 rounds, and got really high end wide receivers, got an elite tight end, something like that. Those are the teams that smashed, that won their league by like 300 points. And every year, I mean, that's what you're looking for. The key is appreciating what you're doing when you draft one of those guys. If you use a top 5 pick on a running back, you're saying this guy is awesome and I expect him to be awesome and he's going to score 300 points for me. And I only have to fill one more running back spot on my roster with these next 19 rounds. You have to appreciate that's what you're doing. So if you think about it that way, then okay, I don't need to take a running back for a while. I'm going to take stud wide receivers from rounds 2 to 6, maybe a tight end. If I can get your Kelsey, your Kittle, Waller, whatever this year, you fill those guys in as you can get them, and then you only have to fill one running back spot, like realistically, with 5 picks later in the draft, and you can do that. You get your Nyheim Hines. You don't need to get Hines and McKissick. You just get one of them. You get one. You get your Antonio Gibson. Like you throw 5 darts, you get one of them, and suddenly you've got one of the best running backs in the entire league that you took with that top 5 pick. You've got another RB1 from one of your darts later in the draft, and you are stacked at wide receiver where you're starting 3-4 maybe per week. If you don't think about it that way, if you think to yourself, all right, I got McCaffrey, I can take Aaron Jones with my next pick. I can take, whoever. Like, I really like Chris Carson, and I'm going to take him in the 4th round last year, or whatever, 3rd round. You can't. You're backing yourself into a corner. You're basically saying McCaffrey wasn't actually a good pick that I made at 1.01. I need more running back points. That's the way you build a bad roster. If you just keep drafting running backs, assuming that your picks were bad. I think humility is like a key part of the zero RB theory. The idea that projections are bad and that you're going to get stuff wrong, and that we get things wrong on running backs, and there's more margin for error on wide receivers. They tend to be safer, but you also can't draft like you can't assume that you were wrong immediately after you make a pick. You can't draft like you're wrong. You can't invest something as valuable as the 1st or 2nd overall pick in a running back and then spend the rest of your draft trying to fill holes at running back. You did it. You invested, like you put all your chips on that running back in the first couple of rounds. Dominate wide receiver now. get a strong tight end, get strong quarterbacks. And that's what makes those super teams, right? Like the team with Kamara and 2 running backs in the second and third round is not the team that dominated your league last year. It's the team that got Kamara and then got Kelsey in the second round and then got, Calvin Ridley in the third round, or, whoever. There weren't any good running backs in the third round last year. It was terrible. But, that's the way you have to approach it. You can't assume, you can't pick assuming that your earlier picks are going to bust.
Right.
If you bust, you're going to lose. Right? I mean, you picked Barkley last year. You almost definitely lost.
I pulled it up. You want to guess what McCaffrey's win rate was last year?
Oh, it was higher than those guys, but it was low. Like 6%?
So you're saying 6%. Keep in mind, the average win rate is 8.3%. McCaffrey's was 1.1%.
1.
Barkley's was 0.3%.
No. Last year?
Pull it up. I'm using your data.
I will pull it up. You're using my data.
So basically, it was impossible to win if you drafted Barkley. I don't know what the team that had him that won looked like. It must have had like Jefferson, Ayuk, or Kelsey somehow. But that's crazy to me. And because the highest win rate ever by any player was Christian McCaffrey in 2019 with 37%. But like 0.3% is a magnitude 25 times off of the league average win rate, where 36.9% is what? It's 5 times.
Damn, it was 1.1%. For some reason I thought he was higher because he actually played games.
I mean, that's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
That's why you diversify, folks.
Was Elliott. Man, these numbers. Because I thought he would. Are you
screen sharing? Are you trying to screen share right now?
I'm not trying to. Am I?
No.
All right. No, I was just looking stuff up. All right. Yeah, no, but like it's killer when you lose one of those running backs. And like, so what I'm saying is, like, if you pick one, assume he's not going to bust like the rest of your draft. Because you're not going to build a team that recovers from that running back busting. Right. It's theoretically possible. These win rates aren't 0, but the right thing to do is, if you use 1.01 on McCaffrey, then you're holding off on running back for a while, because McCaffrey's your stud and he's going to get it done and he's going to score a lot of points, and you only have to fill one running back position the rest of the time. And, a big thing about this is, if you look at, we have this cool tool that I had nothing to do with building, so I can't take credit for it, but it's called the Win the Flex tool at Rotoviz. And it'll show you, based on ADP over the past, several years, how many points you can expect to get from a player at each position based on ADP. And after like the first couple of picks, first 5 picks or whatever, which are dominated by those bell cow running backs, like that actually succeeded, McCaffrey, Barkley, when he wasn't injured, etc. It's just wide receiver with a large gap over running back for like 5 rounds. So if you are taking the McCaffrey, it doesn't make any sense to continue to take running backs after that. The one exception being in these like MFL 10s, if you go 3 running backs right in a row and then just don't take any more, next 17 rounds, you don't have another running back on your roster, you end the draft with 3 of them, you can end up with so many wide receivers that missing out on that second and third round wide receiver doesn't matter. You can score enough points and you can end up winning as long as those running backs don't get hurt. And but like that's it. That's the exception to the rule. I haven't found another combination of picks or strategy that really works by loading up on running back early.
Right. So, I mean, your data is pretty clear on this. You can pull it up if you want, but it's basically, draft a running back in the first 2 rounds, ideally round 1, and then wait until round 6. But like optimally speaking, like RB2, the heat map you showed before is really 9 to 10 would be the best. So like you just wait 8 rounds, and then, our RB3 is rounds 9 through 13, RB4, 13 through 17. You could draft 5 or 6. Your best late round picks are going to be RB, defense, and wide receiver, especially wide receiver, but not so much quarterback and tight end, like we said. Yeah, so let's move on to wide receiver. So if you're not drafting any RBs after you draft that first in round 1, you're probably drafting wide receivers. And like you said, they beat the flex tool. It makes the argument pretty simple. It's just, hey, wide receivers outscore running backs. Like the wide receiver 11 is going to, like, outside after the top 5 running backs or so, like after Alvin Kamara last year, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley the year before that. But so wide receiver 10 through 50 is going to outscore RB 10 through 50, but then factor in ADP, which your beat the flex tool does, and it's just like not even close. People are just so drafting so suboptimally, pushing RBs up in ADP where they really shouldn't, and that's just an easy way to just add points to your team and over your opponents. And we're focusing on Best Ball 10 Classics, which is you start 3 wide receivers, and then there's the flex spot. Wide receivers more likely to contribute to the flex. This will change on FFPC, tight end premium, 2 wide receivers, 2 flex. But yeah.
Yeah, no, but it matters a lot, the format. I was in this Draft Sharks analyst league last year that was super flex, that started 3 wide receivers, had 2 flex positions, and I didn't take a running back until the 11th or 12th round of that draft, because I think it was also tight end premium. It was just like those guys just didn't score as much points, and you have to factor in the format that you're playing in. So I was thinking I'm only going to start 2 running backs. I didn't do a great job of picking running backs. Like, I timed out and auto drafted Marlon Mack, who scored 0 points. I had multiple weeks where I scored 0 points at running back. I'm playing against, it's like everyone is a very strong fantasy football player in that league. Guys who make thousands of dollars playing fantasy football on FFPC, you consider them pros. I came in 4th place in that league without drafting a running back until the 11th round. I took Kittle in the 1st round, and he got injured. And it's just like the structure of my team just kept me alive throughout. I basically made all the bad picks, but I picked them at the right time. I built the team the right way, because I knew that wide receivers score a lot of points. Tight ends are going to score a lot of points in this format. It's super flex, so I'm going to get my quarterbacks early. Things didn't break the right way. I had a couple of injuries. I picked the wrong running backs, and I'm still in the top half of that league of Sharks. It's that kind of situation where if Kittle doesn't get injured, if I pick one more good running back than I did, I had Antonio Gibson, which is the reason I was even close. But one more good running back, I win that league. Like I walk away with it. So you got to pay attention to the format and just put yourself into a position to win. If you're starting a lot of wide receivers, then draft a lot of wide receivers. Don't get carried away by whatever value-based drafting. Like, Christian McCaffrey is going to score 300 more points than the RB 50. I don't care if I can only start 1 Christian McCaffrey, but I can start 8 wide receivers. That's something that matters.
Right. I just pulled up the old MFL 10 of death last year, and where I took Christian McCaffrey. Oh, that team was, it had Keenan Allen, it had Robbie Anderson, Darren Waller, Aaron Rodgers, all guys who, low ADP, who posted tremendously high win rates. But Christian McCaffrey definitely killed me. That 1.1%.
I like the MFL 10 death, MFL 10 of death, because you basically do the opposite of what I do, in that we're always talking throughout it, you're saying, you're asking me questions about roster construction, and I'm like, I think you should do this. And then you're like, yeah. And then you do something else. But then you pick all the right players. And you end up doing well. Like you won it 2 years ago. This year you did well, but you didn't win because McCaffrey got hurt. Right? I don't remember where you finished. But
yeah, you finished third. I finished fifth.
Right. So you did well despite taking McCaffrey because you nailed all these other picks. Meanwhile, I'm just like, doing my roster construction thing, like whiffing on picks. And I did reasonably well too, but I think I took Eckler in the second round, and he was hurt for a while. So like I did all right in spite of that. But it's funny because it just shows like your team wasn't like poorly constructed or anything, but you nailed the picks and you just like overcame stuff. And that's just, it's so much harder to do. It's a thing you're good at. It's a thing that Aaron H is really good at. It's a thing I'm not particularly good at, but I'm competitive in every league that I play in, even if I'm whiffing picks because of this other stuff that I'm focusing on.
2 years ago was a great example. It was the 20th round, the last round. And I asked you, what should I do here? Draft a defense or draft a different position? And you're like, well, what's the other position you draft? Wide receiver. He's like, well, 9 wide receivers with this build like has a really low win rate, and 3 defenses has a really high win rate. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna draft my guy. And I took DJ Chark, who is like one of the biggest league winners, especially at round 20. So yeah, it's just, I mean, if you hit the perfect guy.
So that story though, like I want you to tell everyone that story, because that story, or like everyone has a version of it that they come back at me with whenever I talk about roster construction. They're like, well, in my league, last year I drafted, Lamar Jackson in the second round and I won the whole thing. Congratulations. 10,000 other people did the same thing and they lost. Right. Well, like you made the right pick. And if you're really good at making the right pick, then yeah, continue to make the right pick. But I think I just unplugged my camera. But we got too excited about making the wrong pick. But I get a lot of like anecdotal, like, this doesn't make sense. Like I did the opposite of what you're saying, last year and I won. It's like, yeah, you made a great pick and you deserve credit for that, but you could have built a better roster doing things the right way and making the right picks. Like, you were smart enough to take Chark. Somebody else was smart enough to take, XYZ player. They could have still taken that player and built a more structurally sound
Yeah, Beers, I lost you. Oh, okay. I just got worried because I can't see you now because you unplugged your camera. Me? No.
I don't. Did I unplug my camera? I don't know, man.
I couldn't see you.
Technology's not my thing.
I can't see you, and then I also couldn't hear you for like a brief period of time. So we're just going to segue now to the tight end position. And I think this is really interesting. So tight ends, like quarterbacks, scarcer in best ball. Because they're scarcer, they're more valuable. But high-end tight ends are way more valuable than high-end quarterbacks, in part because they're more scarcer. Quarterback production is pretty flat across the top 50%, but the tight end position is so top-heavy, especially last year. Travis Kelce scored 20.9 fantasy points, Darren Waller 17.4, and then the tight end 4 only 12.2 fantasy points per game, then 11 fantasy points per game. So that's just a massive edge, but it's especially a big edge in best ball where, you draft Travis Kelce, you only need to draft one other tight end pretty late, and then you're good at the position. So you can use that draft capital at the other positions. Travis Kelce last year was the #1 league winner, posted a win rate of 24.4, despite a early second round ADP. And like look at his numbers. This is crazy. So MFL 10 of death is weeks 1 through 16. So just using those numbers, I think best ball 10 is weeks 1 through 17 now. But so he scored exactly double the number 7 tight end. But if you combine the number 3, 4, and 5 tight ends who scored 532 fantasy points, but in a best ball format, so only taking the higher score each week, they scored just 259. So Kelsey alone just scored 315. So you're excluding the flex spot, but just 315 to 259. And like, what's the draft capital to get the number 3, 4, 5 tight end? It's got to be less than spending a first round pick on Travis Kelsey. And so if he's just like who he's been the past 3 years, he's an easy round 1 pick. And I think probably the number 1 running back. You went that route in our mock draft, which we'll get to in a little bit. We'll put the finishing touches up on this theory discussion. But yeah, and the win rate, the historical win rate on drafting tight ends or a tight end before round 4 is huge. It's 11.5%. So right next to modified 0 RB is one of the best draft strategies you can make. And if you don't go that route, the best you could do is 9.4% drafting, 2 guys between rounds 8 and 11, and then another one before round 14. But yeah, that's just proven to be a great strategy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Beers.
Yeah, tight end is I'm still trying to fix it. Oh, I'm back. Do you see me?
Back, baby.
I did it.
Look at that beautiful face.
All right, now I got to pretend I was listening to you during that whole time while I was trying to fix the camera. You were talking about tight ends, right?
Yeah, I can keep going if you're actually.
I heard the word Travis Kelsey. So tight end is there's some pretty clear like patterns if you look back at ADP and how players have actually performed, and it's really good to have a premium tight end who's not an injured Rob Gronkowski, and it makes a huge difference. So the big thing is you get one of these guys, it allows you, again, depending on the format, but let's just stick with the best ball 10s. If you have one of these early guys in the first 3 rounds, you're only going to take 2, for the entire draft, which gives you a lot of flexibility. You don't even have to have a great second tight end. I like to get one, before like the 12th round. So like I'm solid, but I don't have to reach for anybody. I'm not worried about the position. And like you said, having one of these top producers, whether it's Kelsey or, Kittle, is a huge boon to your roster. It not only gives you an advantage over almost every other team at a starting position every single week, but freeing up that spot for another wide receiver late in the draft. These guys that can go off for 20 points but the unpredictable 20 points, you don't know when it's going to happen. Adding that guy to your roster can be the difference between winning and losing. The thing about tight end that I think is a mistake people make and is important to remember is after that premium like tier, your Kelsey, this year would be Kelsey, Waller, Kittle. You don't want to draft your tight end 1 in that second tier. Like last year, that was like, the Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, those kind of guys. It seems like every single year there's this, we've talked about in the past, like a running back dead zone. There's a tight end dead zone from like round, I feel like 5 to, 8. You don't want to get your first tight end there. You're either getting one of these premium guys and only drafting 2 of them, or you're waiting until after that second tier and then you just take 3 of them. Like it's as simple as that. It doesn't mean those guys like Ingram and Henry are undraftable. You can get Kelsey and Kelsey and Hunter Henry is fine. You can you can get one of that like at the back end of that tier as your tight end 1 maybe, but then draft 3 tight ends, like take 2 of them later. But a lot of people think I've got one of those guys. I've got a strong tight end. I only have to draft 2 of them or something like that. And they end up with just not scoring very many points. Like that's the key thing about tight end, I think, is don't fall into that middle ground. And I think that I'm going to try to pull it up here. I'm not going to, I've screwed up enough technology here. I'm not going to try to share the screen until I found it. But there's a pretty good illustration of that in the Win Rate Explorer tool that we were looking at earlier, that kind of heat map. It shows this dead zone for the tight ends. So really, I mean, getting a premium tight end is super valuable. Like you said, I took Kelsey 4th overall in this mock draft we're doing. There are a couple of reasons for that, other than the fact that Kelsey's just awesome and I like having him. But it informs the rest of my draft. I already know I'm only taking 2 tight ends. I took my second one in, I think, the 9th round with my last pick. And I'm not going to take any more. It opens things up for you. It's almost like it's like the most comfortable pick you can make. Planning the rest of your draft. So I think you either get one of those elite guys, and it's best to get him, or you just wait. I think that's like generalizing. That's the strategy.
Yeah, just make sure you're not waiting too long. So just never drafting a quarterback or tight end after round 14 improves your win rate to 9.6% in best ball 10s. And then just the thinking there is like, there are only 21 tight ends to hit triple digits in fantasy points, but on average, there's about 31 tight ends drafted in any given best ball 10. And then defenses, I guess, is really simple. Just draft 2 or 3 and don't draft a defense before round 15.
Yeah. I mean, don't be the first person to draft a defense. I think people are finally getting it, but it was every year I would have like a back and forth with a handful of people on Twitter about defenses. And they would again tell me like, I drafted Jacksonville in the 12th round last year and I was amazing and I won my league. It's a bad pick. Just wait until the end. 16th round at the earliest. If you really like a defense and want to make sure you get them, use your last picks on defense. 3 random defenses are going to outscore the top 2 by ADP every single year. So that's one that that's an easy edge you can gain. Never be the first person to take a defense. All right. I'm gonna try to do the whole screen share thing again because I think this is a pretty cool image from one of our tools about tight ends. So hit the screen share here.
Yeah, I want to screen share the mock draft we're in too. So
I've got that up, so I can
it's working.
I can flip
nice.
right over to it. Cool. All right, but I'm looking at that same tool, that heat map. And I just mentioned that I took Kelsey 4th overall in our draft, which has a pretty nasty looking number of -4% for tight end picks. But most of the first round tight end picks are Gronk from several years ago in MFL 10s. Usually tight ends start around 2nd round. But the thing I wanted to highlight was, okay, 2nd through like halfway through the 4th round, tight ends are great picks. These are the elite guys, right? This is where in the past you were getting that top tier, and then you could just sort of sit back for a bit, take your tight end 2 later, only take 2 of them. But this range right here, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is red to white before you get back into the green again. You don't want to be picking tight ends here. And I don't know why it's consistent year over year, but everybody overvalues the 2nd tier of tight ends. You just ignore them. Wide receivers are a better pick there. Even quarterbacks could be a better pick there. You just don't want to be getting your tight ends in that range. And it can be really great to get the early guys. and it gets nasty after that. So I think this illustrates it really well. This tool here. If you want, so I can pull up the board. Can you see this? This is our mock draft.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've got a little picture of your head blocking your team, but we should talk about your team. You did something interesting. So tell me what's going on with your team here at the 12th spot.
Yeah, so I got weird. I did it for the content to make this live stream a little bit more interesting. So you went high-end tight end, which again, the win rate on that is pretty terrific. And then you neglected running back for a while. You took Kareem Hunt in round 4, and that's about it. For me, I had just messaged you on Twitter, and I'm like, well, what do you think about 2 tight ends? Because the win rate on that is also shockingly really good. And I remember that being a theory or an article where at the time they wanted it to be Gronk and Olsen, something like that. It's like, oh, it's the optimal strategy. And I was suspicious of that. I'm still suspicious of it working, but I think it's interesting, and I'd like to see the results at the end of the year. But my thinking was something along the lines of, okay, so Waller and Kittle are going to put up high-end wide receiver 2 numbers. So not as valuable as a wide receiver there, but the position is so top heavy. So I'm going to crush everyone at tight end. They're going to, one of the tight ends is going to contribute to the flex most weeks. So it's basically getting a wide receiver anyway, just sacrificing a few points. I only need to draft 2. I'm confident in that. I'm going to draft 2 quarterbacks early. So I only need to draft 2. And then I'm going to hammer wide receiver early. And then really just spend all the rest of my picks at running back. I'll probably draft 6 or 7 running backs and the rest wide receivers from here. But looking at the draft board, because my team's hidden for some reason looking at it. But
your team's hidden?
Yeah, I think it's just the way Zoom has it. But I pulled it up on my end. And George Kittle, round 1. Darren Waller, round 2. Amari Cooper, round 3. Julio Jones, round 4. Will Fuller, round 5. DJ Chark, round 6. Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Damian Harris, Zach Moss. Okay, so, 2 tight end, I'm not going to recommend. I'm writing my big best ball primer. It's going to be 7,000 words, a little more in depth than this. It has all the data at hand. Not going to recommend this, but it's an interesting strategy to me, at least. I'm eager to hear your thoughts. But then rounds 3 through 6 is definitely the approach I typically go. Amari Cooper, Will Fuller, DJ Chark. I think those are all, prototypical best ball guys. High weekly ceiling. I think your kids are yelling in the background, Beers.
That's not me.
Oh, all right. Sorry, that was Ben on mute. I was going to tell you to go beat your children.
I did that an hour ago.
But yeah, so Cooper, Fuller, Chark, perfect for best ball, high weekly ceiling, which is I think what you want. And grab 4 of them before round 8. That's proven to be really optimal. The only problem with this strategy, and you're going to have the same problem, is the running backs. The running backs right now suck. Oh my God, do they suck? Damian Harris, Zach Moss, not guys I'm really excited about. Just hoping, they're going to have some, 2 touchdown, 80 rushing yard weeks. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Beers?
Well, I told you before you did it. I don't love the tight end opening. And part of the reason is, who's gonna score more points in a just a regular PPR league? Darren Waller or Stephon Diggs or DeAndre Hopkins? I would think one of the wide receivers is going to score more points. And I think that you are taking a lower scoring position or a lower scoring player at a flex position. that that you could fill with somebody else who scores more points. Like that's my concern with it. I mean, you mentioned that 2 early tight ends, like before getting 2 tight ends before the 4th round, had a very good win rate, and we can see that in the win rate explorer. Tight ends before the 4th round, it's up 12% if you only take 2 of them, which is very nice. But if you look at, before the 3rd round, we're getting to a small sample size, but it doesn't look very good. Meaning, you took them with your first 2 picks. There's only 75 teams. If we pull it back for the full range, there's 90 teams. It's below 5%. And I think a big reason is your second tight end, whichever one of the 2 doesn't end up scoring as many points, is not going to score as many points as whatever wide receiver or running back you could have had. So I think a lot of the high win rate for 2 tight ends before the 4th round comes from teams taking them in the 1st and the 3rd, or in the 2nd and the 3rd, and getting a premium player at one of the other positions. So that bothers me a little bit about it. I like, though, that after using tight ends with the first 2 picks, you didn't then chase running back points. I think the biggest mistake you could have made was taking running backs in the 3rd and 4th round, going after these guys like CEH, Harris, and Montgomery, and then pushing wide receiver even farther down the board, those high scoring players. So I think if you were going to do tight end to open the draft, you've done it in a good way. And I would think you probably need 7 running backs with this draft. But it's not something I love to do. I said I like to have a premium tight end, and it creates a lot of flexibility for me. I don't feel like you've given yourself a lot of flexibility. I feel like by doing that, you put yourself in a position where you have to take a lot of running backs, and you kind of have to take a lot of wide receivers, which forced you to take 2 good quarterbacks. So it's like you did the right thing by taking 2 good quarterbacks. Like you're playing it sort of optimally, I think, but you didn't have a lot of options. Like if you happen to really like one of the running backs who fell in rounds 3 through 6, and you took him, I think you'd have been in a terrible position. So you didn't have the opportunity to do that. Whereas, so I have the 1 tight end, and I took him earlier than his ADP. I think his ADP is 8th overall. And when we got to the 4th round's not, what the hell just happened? Is not a place that I am normally looking at running backs. I consider that kind of the dead zone for running backs. But I liked Hunt more than any of the next 5 guys after him. And so I just pulled the trigger on him. And, I don't think you could have done that after your tight end opening. So, that's one thing that bothers me a little bit about it. But I think that given that you did it, you're going about it in a really good way. You've made the right decisions conditional on that opening. So it could definitely work out. And if these guys are both good and healthy, you're going to have an extremely strong team. So it's not my preferred way to go. But it absolutely can work, and you're doing it in a good way.
All right. So I was just told we have to wrap this up in about 5 minutes. So let's end on this. Who has your favorite team, and who has your least favorite team, and why is it green?
All right. Who has my least favorite team? Yeah, it's Graham.
he got auto drafted for 2 of his picks, at least 2. So that kind of killed him. But yeah.
Yeah, I think his 3rd and 4th were both auto picks, and it's really unfortunate because you can make an argument for the running back in the 3rd round, CEH. If you think he's going to be good, then you do the 3 running backs, and like what I described earlier, and then you just don't take any running backs for a while. But then you got the 4th one, and Montgomery could be a good value in the 4th round. He was good last year, but it's too much at running back. You only start 2 of these guys, 3 of them maximum. And if you're starting 3 of them, you're boxing out one of your wide receivers. It's just not a good construction. Though I don't know who this is, so I don't like, disparaging them with their team. Okay. Okay, so Team 11 is my second least favorite team, purely because of these quarterbacks. I gotta stop clicking on this. 2 quarterbacks in the first 5 rounds is not a winning strategy, like overall. It's too much invested in the position. You can get away with one of them. Like, I don't hate the Mahomes pick, even though it's not one that I would have made in the 3rd round. I don't hate it. But if you do that, you have to wait until, this area, 9th or 10th round, to get your QB2, and you need like a stud receiver, not stud, but like a good receiver, a good running back, or good tight end with this Kyler Murray pick. So structurally speaking, I'm not a big fan of this one. And then my favorite team so far, let's see. I always like Siegel's teams, Team 6, but depending on how he does it, I like Team 1 quite a bit. As long as Tyler doesn't take another running back the rest of the way, this one could be really, really good. I would be looking to take a couple more wide receivers here, maybe a quarterback with the next pick, but end up with 9 wide receivers, take 3 defenses, have either 3 quarterbacks or 3 tight ends, this hyper fragile build. He's setting himself up so that if CMC, Sanders, and Gibson are all healthy for the majority of the year, or even 2 of them are healthy for the entire year, this team could absolutely smash with 9 wide receivers, putting up, spike weeks, filling in all the starting positions, as long as he doesn't have some kind of catastrophic injury to if he ends up with 2 quarterbacks instead of 3, or 2 tight ends instead of 3, to one of those guys. I like this one a lot. I really like my team so far, but I don't think it's the best. I got sniped in the 9th round. I really wanted Tanyan. I thought he was a perfect complement to Kelsey, because I thought Tanyan could have some spike weeks with the touchdowns he gets.
Good call.
But so I'm feeling good about my team. It's going to come down to the running backs. I can get the rest of the way, just like for you. And I think we're going to be fighting over some guys. I played it kind of safe in this draft. I think people might find that counterintuitive, given that I took Kelsey 4th overall. But I was mostly picking players who I know what team they're going to be on, and I'm not real worried about things getting messed up in free agency or contracts or whatever. But yeah, I'd say so. Graham, we'll give him a mulligan. But he's my least favorite, and then Tyler has potential to be my favorite by the end of this thing.
Yeah, so I'd agree. I think Tyler has my favorite team, and Graham has my least favorite team. We got to wrap this bad boy up. Michael Beers, as always, what a pleasure. So grateful for you to grace us with your Thank you for doing this. Thanks for everything. Thanks for your tools. And like I said, you are the preeminent best ball expert. Folks at home, make sure you follow him at Beerswater on Twitter. Pay some money for a Rotoviz sub. You won't regret it. And that's it, I think.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I want to point out we had you told some people to follow me yesterday. Thank you for that. But and one of them asked, basically was looking for any articles I'd written. Like, did he switch sites? I haven't written an article in like 3 years. So you won't find them. But I've been building all these tools for Rotoviz. So really it's Rotoviz, and my Twitter account is where you're going to find my good stuff. So please subscribe if it's in your budget, and please give me a follow on Twitter, and I will try to provide you with some good best ball content. Thanks for having me on, Scott. This was fun.
Boom.